Welcome to the next Nix Hour. I just want to point out that if you have a question you want to ask, feel free to join the meeting. It's going to be in the link in the YouTube description. You can also ask questions in chat or by voice. But yeah, we have in here Zug who wants to ask a question. Go ahead.
Yes, so my question is, I'm trying to set up K3S, which is a Kubernetes tool, in rootless mode within NixOS. And it errors due to not having the correct cgroup permission set for my user slice. And so I'm trying to find instructions on how to edit that. And the documentation that I've managed to dig up for RHEL Linux does not work.
I see. Are you using the NixOS module? Or is there?
I am using NixOS as my operating system.
Yep. So have you? So I noticed there is a K3S module here. Are you using that by enabling this in your NixOS system?
I am not. I'm currently doing that through nix-shell.
I see. Okay, so that could be an interesting thing to look at. So on NixOS, you can install packages just by using nix-shell, or you can use nix-env, or you can also use environment.systemPackages. But all of these just kind of add the package files to the system. So let me use nix-env here as an example, and I'm going to install. I guess let me just use this from the autocompletion here. And so I installed hello, but now the only thing I have is that files are available somewhere in here. I mean, we can type hello, that works now. Generally, on NixOS things get installed. So, well, if you were to use NixOS rebuild with environment system packages, it would be in run current system SW bin. There would be the binaries. Man pages would be in, actually not in here, or share man, and so on. Yeah, the nix-shell, it doesn't install it anywhere. It just adds it to your path. Nix-env would add it to your user environment, which should also be in the path, and so on. But just by doing this, sometimes packages need more things to get working. And so on NixOS, you have the option of using these these services, these modules, which do more things usually. On one hand, there's modules, and we can go in here in Nix packages. Let's look at NixOS modules. Packages should be somewhere, or programs. Yeah, programs here. So these are kind of not services, but they just install programs while doing some extra things. So, for example, tmux in here. So I can see here it can generate configuration files. You can enable it with programs.tmux.enable. And so this, well, first what it does is it adds it to environment.systemPackages. So if we go down here, environment system packages, we can see tmux in here. But it also does a whole bunch of other things, like setting environment variables to get it to work correctly. Here's a security wrapper, which apparently is needed. So this doesn't install any services, as you can see here. But if we go into any of the service, we can see that it installs something here. Actually, let's go to K3S here and look at the module of K3S, so what it does. Okay, how big is the module? Okay, 180 lines. If we go to the implementation, so it's the config part here, we can see some assertions. That's nice to see. We can see it adds it to system packages, but it also installs a service. And I guess in here, sometimes I don't see anything obvious about cgroups. I don't see anything here, no. But I know there is things you can set for cgroups, and I'm just gonna do a quick. Actually, what would the options be called? Cgroup. I don't think it's cgroup because systemd has like cgroup integration, right? So if we go systemd.exec, look at the man page and cgroup here, we can find. Oh, that's listed in systemd resource control. Okay, systemd resource control. All right, that explains the things. Right in here, we can see some cgroup options. I guess you didn't ask about how to set these values, but I'm gonna try just finding some related things by searching for these values. So, for example, let's look at memory accounting, memory high, memory max. What if we search for memory max? Okay, well, just a little bit here, memory max. Yeah, okay, so these systemd, these cgroup options apparently are set in systemd in the service config. Yeah, so about your question, I can't answer that myself directly, but okay. I guess just kind of recommendation, try out the systemd module to see maybe if that works. Yep. And then if you have if you just run it without it, and if you run and it doesn't work, but then you use the systemd module and it does work, you can kind of bisect it, try to figure out what systemd does to make it work. I know I've done this before with cgroups at one point to kind of make it make the resource groups as I expect them, but I can't quite remember where that was. So cool. Yeah, I hope that helps.
I'll get a follow-on question if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So I have a user service that controls my login session. And there is a file at Nix store, some weird hash, something called user unit service. And inside of that, there's a systemd pile of information. And I can't quite figure out what generates that, because I would just add in the relevant systemd things that say give my user the relevant access.
Yeah. What is the file exactly called? So you have this hash, but then you also have a name that is after the dash.
Unit-user.
Oh, just unit-user. Okay. So, yep, unit-user dot service. Yeah, this. If we grep for this in nix-packages in the modules, we should find it. We don't find it. Actually, yeah, we shouldn't find it. So, I believe this. Actually, let's look at configuration. So we have options systemd dot user. Let's go to the actual one I expect here. Right here. Oh, it's a bit systemd.units.user.units. It should be somewhere in here. Systemd.user.units. This is kind of the generic kind of variable that encompasses this. But let's try to do this using nix-repl to kind of discover where this gets set. And so I'm gonna just try a simple configuration.nix. Let's get one from. Do I have one here? I do have one here, and this one should work. Okay, so I'm gonna do nix-repl. So assuming you're on a NixOS system, actually we can just do this. nix-packages NixOS like this. And so this loads the kind of top level variables of NixOS. So that's like config, you have options in here, and you can just inspect them right here. And so in this case, let's look at config. So config is the actual value of the options. Okay. Well, let's try this first. So config, and then systemd. Okay, had to evaluate something, but auto-completion works now. So systemd, and then we have a user. So we also have config.systemd.units. These are the system-wide units, whereas the user units are, right, they're instantiated for all of the users when they, or all of the users can use them for their own user session. So user.units. Okay, now in here, what do we have? We have, well, actually, we don't have the same as you, but I guess it doesn't really matter. We can evaluate these two. So now let's look at, for example, dbus.service. And in here, we should see, so actually auto-completion doesn't work because this is quotes in here. But now we can see the actual raw text in here. This is stored under text. Text doesn't always exist. Sometimes it's specified as a source. So the text isn't really known at evaluation time. But the one thing that's kind of generic under here is unit. And with this, you kind of get the path to the derivation, or out path gets you the path to the final one. So in this case, this would be your unit-user. But the users don't actually specify this option value. And we can, so I mean, let's see, where is this specified? And we can do this by, oh, actually, this is going to be a bit tricky, but let's try it. So instead of using config, because config just has the final value, it kind of got rid of all of the information about how that value was achieved and how it was merged and so on. To get at that information, you can use options and can use the same thing. It doesn't work for the entire thing here, so it's option specific. And so in particular, this is an option, while this is a nested option. It's a nested submodule. So this is kind of an arbitrary value here. It's like on the type side, it's an address of submodule. But so yeah, we can't do this entire thing in here. We just need the options dot and then units. So now we get at all the information about how this systemd.user.units option was set. And so in here we have things like what is the type. So we could say, okay, type, that's a bit large, type.description. We can see, oh, that's an attribute set of submodule as shown before. We have things like nested types as well. That's some, type.nested types. Anyways, not that important. We have the option description as well. We have, and then the interesting thing is the definitions with locations. So this shows you exactly where this option was defined. And so if we look at this, so I printed the strict value here. It's a bit large. Let's actually, so these are the definitions with the locations. But yeah, let's just get the locations and not bother about where exactly or what exactly they were defined as. So we can do this with just files. Now we can see, okay, this file defines these units. And so something that kind of stands out here is that the actual service modules do not define such a type. Instead, it appears to be some systemd internal option that doesn't really, or isn't really intended to be set manually. So let's try this. Let's look at this user, and now we want to find where this option is defined. So let's look at this file, units equals, and so here we have the option definition. And if we go to the next match down here somewhere, here we can see the actual definition of this option. So yeah, this didn't really help us in this case, but we can see a clue here, namely that they're just kind of merged together from all of the individual types of units. And so these are the individual options under here. So let's go back to configuration.nix. So we had systemd.user.units. All right. So this is the kind of generic one, but there's also these services. Oh, I need to go up, I think. Yeah. So services, and we have targets and so on. And here we can see the code that kind of makes that work. So it takes the services and puts them under units as well, with some transformation under here. All right, so we can kind of do the same thing again. We can go into the next REPL. We can look at not units this time, but services. Services.files. And now we can see, yeah, we can see these. In this case, actually, we want the definitions as well. So let's do definitions with locations. All right, this is actually, oh no, it's not too bad. This is a bit tricky to see in here, but we can. So we had services like, what did we have? So let's go under config.systemd.user.services, then autocomplete. Right, so we had only these 3 services. And so, for example, let's look at the NixOS activation. In your case, this would be the user, I think. Actually, probably Home Manager has the sources for that. But okay, so let's go options.definitions with locations. Let's look a bit for the, what was it, the dbus one, which is hard to navigate actually. How about doing it like this? Let's use built-ins.lmat to get at the first value. So this is systemd tmp files. What is the first one? That is NixOS activation. All right, and what is the third one? That is dbus. Okay, so dbus is defined in here. So we can go in here. Well, we also see the value of it, but we can go in here and see dbus equals, and we can see it defined down here. Also, this is how you get to the definition. But so now we actually know like which options set these value. And so it's the systemd.services. Oh, and actually this is the system one. The user one is down here. Yeah. So this option sets values for these services. So if you want to customize these, you can just define these options the same way, and the module system will take care of merging them together. So if I wanted to customize the dbus one here and say that do not reload if it is changed, I'm just going to copy this here, and let's go into my configuration.nix and then set this here, and I'm gonna minimize this a little bit. False. All right. And now let's try it again and see. Well, let's comment this out first and just evaluate the value. Or actually, let's try to actually build the unit file so we can see what changed without actually building the entire NixOS system. And we can do this by using nix build. I'm going to use nix-packages NixOS. I'm going to show how you can do this without the angle brackets later. So nix build nix-packages NixOS. And now we want to, so it uses the configuration in our etc NixOS by default, but we can access all the option values in here as well. So in here I'm going to do systemd.user.units. And then I'm going to access I'm going to make sure it's quoted correctly here. The dbus, I think it's dbus.service, and then the unit file. So this is an option. We can also see that in the manual or in configuration.nix. Try this. Oh, it needs to build some documentation. It might take some seconds. Let me briefly read chat. Oh, user@.service. Oh, I see. Okay, yeah. So in this case, it has to be a bit different, but let's leave this running in the background. So Yuri in the chat points out that, right, there's also these, let's actually look at systemd.directives, man systemd.directives. That's kind of just an index page for systemd. Very useful. It tells you where you, like, what is the correct man page to find things. And so I believe this is like template or something like this. Systemd nspawn, maybe not entirely. An at symbol, so that was pointed out. At is this anywhere in here? Namespace, not quite. Yeah, these are just all, oh, here, actually this looks kind of related. Okay, so this is a man page apparently. Yeah, okay. But yeah, so this actually, where is it? What is the name of this feature? Because services can be instantiated multiple times. Is it just instantiations or something? Doesn't matter. Briefly, this finished building. Now we can, so we built it like this. Now we can just, now we can just cat the result. Oh, actually, result debusted service, and we can see what it contains. In this case, we have this reload if changed equals true. But now if we change this to false, down here, reload if changed false. Well, actually, it might not work by default. We might get an error. Nope, we don't get an error. And actually, nothing seems to have changed. Yeah, nothing seems to have changed. That is not great. We could debug this. I need to make sure that this is saved. I did build the user unit debus.service. It is the debus.service. So we could go back into here, do like this, and figure out that, right, the same thing as before, debus. And we can see that it doesn't have our own file in the configuration.nix. Sometimes if you don't know whether like values get actually read or files get read, I think it's very useful to just add a throw somewhere, because that should cause an error. If it doesn't cause an error now, we can be sure that the file isn't even like looked at, or at least this value isn't being looked at. So if we do that, next build. Okay, yeah, so this value is not being read. Is this file even read? Like, we could try that just by adding like a syntax error. Kind of hacky, but that does work. Oh yeah, I mean, I've been getting this this warning, these two warnings here for some time. I didn't even look at them. So yeah, I can just for completion, like, why does this happen? And this gets the NixOS configuration from the NixOS config Nix path, or this environment variable, but this one isn't set in my case. And so to figure out where that points, you can look at actually there's a command for that, resolve. Just take a find file, yeah, find file NixOS config. So this points to a kind of hard-coded configuration in my system, which I added so that NixOS rebuild would not actually rebuild my system and kind of give a good warning, which I just ignored until now. But yes, so this is in Nix path. And so Nix instantiate resolves things from Nix path. I did remove channels now, by the way. This should be empty. But yeah, here's my NixOS config. And this should be my Nix packages. So yeah, to actually, so we can Nix build by default, it uses that, this NixOS config, but in our case we want to override this, so I'm going to use arg here. So arg configuration, this is an argument in this default file in the NixOS folder, which we can override. So I'm going to do nixOS configuration.nix. And yeah, now we actually get the error. We added the syntax error. So I'm going to remove the syntax error. Now we still have an evaluation error. Let's see if that triggers. And yeah, it does trigger. So it's a bit confusing, but we tried to throw a boolean here. That's why it says that we cannot curse a boolean to a string, because throw takes a string as an argument. Yeah, so now if we remove this, and actually the error that I was expecting, because now we have two modules that try to set the value, but to different values, one in configuration and one in dbus. Now to resolve this, we can use lib.makeForce in here. That kind of tells it take higher priority than normal. And up here we need to add lib to make sure it exists in our scope. All right, let's rebuild it again. And let's see if it worked. And yeah, it worked. Well, it's not there anymore. But that's, I guess, the expected effect. Let's just confirm if we comment this out. Build it again. And it's there again. Yeah, so this is the example. Yeah?
By the way, you don't really have to build it, right? You can just evaluate the text field of the unit.
Yeah, that depends on whether the text is actually specified. In some cases, it's not. The kind of general way is building the unit, but yeah, let's in this case it is available at evaluation time. So let's try this. Instead of nix building, we're just going to do a nix instantiate --eval, and that worked. Well, now we need to. So that's where the so raw actually, yeah, so raw doesn't exist in the old CLI, which is a bit unfortunate. So there's no kind of stable, nice way to get at these raw kind of string values. But like a workaround for the old one is using --JSON and then piping it into JQ and then -r for raw and then just a dot. Now we get the kind of raw value. In the new CLI, I guess we can't access this, but let's just, well, it's the experimental CLI. I need to point that out. But let's try this as well. So nix eval, and then it should be, let's use imp here. Let's replicate the same thing. Now we need to import this path here. Now pass the value here for configuration equals this, etc nixOS configuration.nix. And now we want to get this one at the text. So I'm going to wrap the entire thing here with this here. All right. And I need to fix the quoting here a bit. Okay. Is not a value URL. Oh, I need to pass expression --exper. All right, that worked. And now we can actually use the --raw flag here. All right, nice. And I guess same for build. So build should also work here. Nix build. And I guess you can, does not value to a derivation, right? We accessed tags, not unit. You can only build the unit. But yeah, you can also remove the impure flag here if it's not actually impure, if you point to a flake or something like that. Yeah, and well, in this case, it didn't print it. I believe there's also print out paths, which you could add to make it print the out paths. Very nice. So this is kind of the same behavior as before, but it does create the result symlink as well. So this would also work. Let's just confirm this actually removes the result symlink and build it again. And yeah, you can cut the result. All right, let me briefly. Yeah, so chat, thanks for the message. But yeah, now let's get back to the actual user add thing. So you pointed out that unit add exists in here. Oh, well, oh, I guess it's a systemd unit that exists by default. Right. How would you do that actually?
User, not
Oh, user add. Ah, I see. Will we find it in here? NixOS modules. User add. That looks pretty good actually. Over here, there's a bunch of these. Yeah, it's actually to customize this user one. Let's just build it to see that we can see the changes. I'm going to use nix build again. But yeah, so this is not actually a user session unit, but it's kind of a, I guess it does create a user session unit in the end, but it is specified under the system units. And so let's just access this here, user add.service.unit. And now we can probably get at, well, that's not a whole bunch actually. Can expect more. But yeah, let's just go with this. So now if you wanted to customize this, instead of this thing here, we would be doing, I mean, we can see the option here, although this is again the unit one, not the generic one. So to change this, we would go into systemd.services. Now here is user add. Yeah, just user add. And then, so for example, unit config for the unit section. So, I mean, let's add some bogus here, foo equals foo. Actually, does this even work? Does systemd allow this? We'll find out in, well, probably NixOS generates it anyways, no matter whether systemd allows it or not. Yeah, so that worked, and we can see our bogus variable in here. Yeah, and so this is a unit section up here. And this is what the unit config is for. We can also change the service section by using service config. This is kind of a standard convention in here. You can also see all of the options by going to the all of the options. So systemd that's services, and now here's the let's scroll down here. Here's the address of submodule thing again, the type of this option. And here we can see the kind of variable names, and that's represented in the option listing as this bracketed name. And under here, we should be able to see the unit config. Yeah, here's systemd services unit config, and right, says this is for the unit section, and yeah, systemd.unit for more details. And I think systemd.unit contains information on what you can set in the unit section. But systemd.service, for example, right, that shows you what you can do in the service section. Right, things like type and so on. Yeah. Okay, I think this was fairly extensive actually, and I'm really glad we could show this kind of REPL trick. It's really very useful, but not a lot of people know about this, right? How you can use these, right, things like this to figure out where things were declared. This works for all of the options. Maybe just to make a final example here. Let's figure out where stateVersion was set. We can do this just by options.system.stateVersion.file, or actually files. Yes. Oh, right, and I didn't pass my own configuration.nix. I did want to show how you could do that kind of purely earlier. Let's start with REPL without loading anything from the Nix path. Now I'm gonna do, well, not purely, but just as a nix expression. Actually, we could see this earlier. I did a nix eval of this. This works, and in case of flakes, you just have to replace this path here with a path to NixPackages. And I guess let's do this for completion. So instead of this, I'm gonna just replace this part with a, so I want to append the NixOS to the NixPackages location. And how do we get NixPackages? We can get the built-in.get flake, I suppose. And the NixPackages should be in the registry, so this should work. Although many people don't like the registry, me included. And now this fetches the latest master NixPackages, and yeah, that should work in a second. Well, should.
Does plus here works after get flake?
Plus, that should work, yeah. So this is just how, and here we have it. So this is just how things get parsed in Nix. Function application takes precedence over, I think, everything, well, almost everything else. So we can also kind of verify what happens using nix instantiate parse. This allows us to just kind of parse an expression and see it parenthesized in the way that it gets parsed. So we can just like take this here and get this back and see that, oh yeah, there's like a parenthesis here and the plus doesn't take precedence. And well, let's maybe also show the kind of one case where this kind of throws people off. And so let's say we have like an attribute set. So let's say attrs equals a. And now let's try accessing something from here. So attrs.a, that works. But now, what if we access something that doesn't exist? So attrs.b, well, we should evaluate this probably. Okay, right, and so we get the error, b is missing. But then you can add a fallback. So you can say attrs.b or something else. So let's say null. So we have null fallback. Now we can evaluate it again. But sometimes you want to throw an error. So what do? We use throw. Throw attribute doesn't exist. And let's make sure this is appropriately quoted like this. So it doesn't exist. And finish the quote here. It's a bit messy to work in the command line arguments here, but yeah. Attribute doesn't exist. Oh, that actually, wait, that did work. That should not have worked. Oh, or should it? No, that should have worked. Also, let's use parse. I hope it should be obvious, yeah, there. Oh, it doesn't parenthesize the ors. That's a bit unfortunate. Yeah, so what I kind of want to show here is that this shouldn't work. You need to parenthesize this here. Right, and I guess we can see it in here. I guess that's an interesting way to debug this. But yeah, so this kind of changed the expression. Let's have something simpler here. Let's do like, let's try to figure out the associativity of an operator. So let's see, what if you do a plus b plus c? Like we want to find out how does this parse? What gets evaluated first? How does it get combined? If we just do this, actually, yeah, we can see a is not a valid variable. So let's do like function a, b, c. All right. And yeah, we can see a plus b is parenthesized together. And to kind of also verify this, we can add the parentheses ourselves. Doesn't change it. Or we can add the parentheses back here. And that does change what gets parsed. And kind of the same thing we can do here. Let's make it a bit simpler though. Attrs or a dot be or throw error like this. So we want to figure out how does this get parsed, but in this case the or doesn't really add any parentheses. Like this expression is just kind of one blob, even though there's 3 separate sub-expressions. And so let's do the thing from earlier. We're going to add parentheses here. And we see that nothing changed. So apparently that's the order in which this gets parsed. But this is not what we want. We don't, well, in this case, I guess it works because this kind of fails before. But it's not the right thing sometimes. So instead, if we do it like this, we can see that that it did change here. And yeah, so this is what usually should be more correct. Oh yeah, we had some suggestion about instead of this, I think you can just do this. Oops. Oh, this is just to, oh yeah, that should work too. Yeah, let's briefly try this. Like this. That does seem to not parse correctly. This works.
Backslash works only in double quotes, not in single quotes. It doesn't.
Oh
work.
yeah, I mean in single quotes here. But yeah, so that's just some bash weirdness. But yeah, so this is just parse, kind of useful. Just want to ask, does anyone have any question or anything that wasn't clear or something they're curious about? Or a completely separate question is also okay. We do have Henrik. Henrik's question from earlier we could get to. All right, that sounds like a no. Otherwise, feel free to ask in chat all the time. So Henrik, before the meeting, said that he was curious about the, well, for one, kind of the implementation details of the thing I talked about last time, the implementation of RFC 140, which is currently the thing I'm working on. But also just generally the RFC process. I think we do have 15 more minutes. I think just talking about the RFC process in general would kind of fit well. And so let's kind of start from here. So this is the RFC's repository. RFC stands for Request for Comments. Kind of a weird name. It's really just proposals that are a bit more substantial, that might, right, I mean, it's written down here, substantial in quotes, and it's described here. So like if you want to change the next language, and it's kind of a big change, it's a syntactic change, semantic change that might break things. If you want to remove kind of language features, if you want to do like big restructurings of Nix packages, like the thing I've been doing with RFC 140, and some other kind of larger scope things. And in that case, why do we need an RFC? Because there might be controversy about whether it's a good thing to do. So I could just make a pull request to implement these things. And so, I mean, let's look at the 140 part 2. So just want to show, so this is what it would look like to commit it and implement it, and for someone to merge it. The number of files that are being changed in here is about 13,000. And so the problem there is like no one wants to really be responsible for this and kind of say, okay, I'm going to merge it, and nobody really wants to be like confident enough to say that I am sure this is a good change and I'm going to commit to it. And so in that case, you can make an RFC to kind of figure out these things. You can then have a structured way of describing the change, of motivating the change, of figuring out all the kind of all the trade-offs about the change, and really convince people that this is a good idea, and it's worth it and we should do it. And so yeah, this is what the RFCs are for. So how you open one, or if you want to make one, it's really just a pull request for now. The process should be described in here as well. Also like how they work. Let me go over this in a second. Yeah, I mean, we should go over this now. So just some, like, how does it, so okay, you open an RFC. That's actually idea, go submit PR. Right, so let's say you have this idea to make a bigger change. You gather feedback, you write an RFC, and then you submit a PR. And actually is this, there's 2 diagrams here. I don't know why there's 2. There was a question in chat which I actually do want to answer, but maybe at the very end, because I have something to link to. Ready for review, starts draft, on hold. Okay, so this is once the PR is already opened. But yeah, so once you have an open PR, and actually let's look at this first here, how you have a template in here that kind of shows you what you should fill out here. So we can see motivation, detailed design, examples, directions, drawbacks, alternatives, a bunch of important things. And so now once you have an open PR, you kind of just have to wait for a bit for the steering committee to kind of open the RFC for nominations. So what would people nominate for? And that is the Shepherd team. The Shepherd team is arguably the kind of most important, or it's the team that progresses with the RFC. So the Shepherd team is being selected by the steering committee, comprised of a couple members of the community that have interest in the RFC, and they're then responsible, the Shepherd team is then responsible for making progress with it, reviewing it, and then finally accepting or rejecting it. Usually it tends to go that a lot of changes are being requested, such that in the end it is being accepted, the RFC, or just closed and not like properly rejected. And so just steering committee, who are these people that select the Shepherd team? So the steering committee rarely changes. The steering committee doesn't have any like authority over making decisions for RFCs. They just kind of make sure the process goes along. People find it is also on the NixOS org who is actually in that team. So if you go to the community section here, we can see all of the different teams down here. So here's the steering committee, and we can see that has 4 members right now, and they meet every 2 weeks, I believe. And actually just recently, last week, I nominated myself to be part of the steering committee, because actually there should be 5 members, but in the previous iteration, nobody nominated themselves to be part of the committee. But yeah, so steering committee kind of plays a background role in evaluating the RFCs. The Shepherd team is specific for each RFC itself, right? And so kind of the last stages, so the Shepherds discuss the RFC, finally accept it, but then before actually merging it, there's the final commit period, or FCP. And in that period, it's a 10-day period. 10 calendar days, where the RFC is widely announced on like discourse and mainly discourse, and we can see this here in the announcements category. Here's the RFC announcements. So here you can see all the FCP announcements for these. So here's mine. Here's the announcement for my RFC. Initially it didn't pass, but in the end it did pass. And so this is just kind of to make sure that everybody in the community has the chance to see the proposal and to review it. And if someone has any big objections, they could still voice them in the RFC itself. And then the steering committee, or no, not the steering committee, the Shepherd team can look at that and evaluate, oh, we didn't consider that and we need to go back to the drawing board, or or most of the time there isn't any major feedback and people can just, we can just accept it. Let's also look at like how these RFCs tend to go. I mean, we could look at, actually let's look at mine here. So, usually give a brief summary up here. You can often see, oh, actually, no, this is not the RFC. The RFC is here. This is the implementation here. So here's the RFC. Usually people put a rendered link right here, so you can jump to the file as rendered directly. And I mean, you can, I don't want to go into details on the RFC itself right now, but I just gave some more context here in the RFC, usually not done all of this. But yeah, here you can see the discussion. Usually we want to mark these comments here as resolved when they are resolved, so the thread is a bit shorter. Unfortunately, GitHub doesn't play very well with long discussions. So if I scroll down here a bit, we can see this box of doom right here, which only loads 60 items at a time, I believe, right now. So if you want to see all the discussions, you need to just kind of do this and a bunch of times. And for longer or for larger RFCs, I mean, even this is kind of annoying. This gets really annoying. So like there is an RFC that was for flakes. I don't want to go into detail on what happened there. You can ask me in a future version, in a future session. But where is it? It should be 49, I believe. RFCs pull 49. Yeah, here it is. So yeah, this one got a ton of feedback. So if you go to this here, 280. Okay, it's 290. Fair enough. There's also a lot of threads that have a lot of discussion. Right, we can see here in total 550 comments. So yeah, it gets really out of hand at that point, and so people try to really only focus on, or that's my recommendation, only focus on reviewing the kind of main idea and don't like talk about typos and things like that. That it could make a lot of noise. And so let's say you made an RFC, it gets accepted. Let's look at this for mine down here. So in the end, gets put into FCP. This is also written down here somewhere. And then at some point, this happens, it gets merged. And then it's really it's the green light to actually implement it, and kind of in the implementation, it shouldn't really be a question of like, is this a good idea anymore? It's just is the implementation correct? Does it correspond to the RFC? And so it's much kind of easier to get this to get merged. So this is what I'm working on right now. For this RFC, there's 2 separate PRs to implement it. Also, RFCs are good when you want to do cross-repository changes. So if you want to make a Nix and a NixPackages change that both need to be done kind of together, you can kind of propose this, and then you can go ahead and make these 2 separate PRs. So I do want to quickly get to the question in the chat, and that is how does Nix compare to Spack? Could Nix replace Spack? So I do know there is some overlap in this. I believe Spack has much better version resolution, and actually, so I'm part of the NixPackages architecture team, which has all of its meetings streamed to this YouTube channel. And in the beginning, actually we have a meetings thing as well. In the beginning of the team, I do remember inviting I believe the author or one of the main authors of Spack into the meetings to talk about version resolution related to Nix. And so I'm just gonna search through the meeting notes here for Spack. Okay, we have 2 here actually. I believe it might be this one. Yeah, T. Gamblin joined, and we can see the recording here as well. And actually this should be rendered here as well. Yeah, so this is the meeting. I'm briefly gonna link it in the Jitsi chat here. Yeah, if you're interested, I suggest taking a look at this. There's some meeting notes. There's a recording you can listen to that might be useful. All right, and I think we have like 1 more minute, but let's end it a bit earlier. I don't see, or does anyone still have any question about things here? If not, we will end it right now. So thanks for joining, and see you again, hopefully in another Nix Hour.